Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Spring Forward Strategic Planning for College and Career Success from Junior to Senior Year, our first My Journey webinar of the 2025 season. My name is Candace, and I'm with ACT, and I'm very excited to announce this webinar and our partnership with Collegewise. A few housekeeping tips before we get started to make sure that you have the best experience viewing this webinar. First, we recommend that you use Google Chrome or a high-speed, stable internet connection. Second, we recommend that you close any unnecessary applications or tabs. If you need to, if the session freezes, you can refresh your browser F5. All items on the screen are resizable and movable, so you are able to toggle to make the screen what you would like it as far as how you want to interact with us in the webinar, including the Q&A. If you need closed captioning, click the closed caption icon in the bottom right-hand side of the media player. And to engage with our presenters, you can submit questions at any time using the Q&A window. This webinar is being recorded, and you will receive an email with the recording after the webinar, and you can also find it on our ACT website on the My Journey page. The resources window also has additional materials that you could find helpful, and those will also be available after the webinar via email and on our My Journey page. So again, this is Spring Forward Strategic Planning for College and Career Success from Junior to Senior Year. And I'm going to go ahead and hand it off to Kevin McMullin, the founder and CEO of Collegewise, our first presenter.
Thanks, Candace, and thanks to everybody for joining us. We've been really excited about doing this, and we're always really grateful when people take time out of their evenings to show up to a webinar to hear what we have to share. So our goal is to make this worth your while and send you away feeling better and more optimistic about your college planning than when you arrived. And you know, the title of this webinar is appropriate because this is a really exciting time for juniors in college planning. And if it's feeling more like a stressful time, hopefully we'll be able to help you with that. But because 1 year from now, just 1 year from now, if you are currently in 11th grade, you will almost certainly have applied to college. And if you have not heard from some schools already by that time, you will very shortly, 1 year from now, be hearing from schools that you applied to. So there's a lot of exciting things that are going to happen in the next year. And before we dive into the information and advice, it would really help us if we could learn just a little more about who we're speaking to today. So if you wouldn't mind completing this short poll, tell us if you're a student, a parent, or if you're a counselor or an educator. This is the best kind of question in college admissions because it's impossible to get wrong. In fact, I don't want you to do this, but you don't even have to tell the truth. You can tell us that you're something that you're not, and we can't even punish you for it. But please, it just gives us a sense of who our audience is. I feel like we should play the Jeopardy music while people are doing this, even though they're not thinking as deeply as you would if you're on that TV show. But I'll give you just another 10 seconds here to finish it, and then we'll go and see what our results look like. We've got a lot of attendees here today. That's always really encouraging. Okay, 5 more seconds to tell us which group you're a part of. And let's see our results here. No, this is great. That's a really great representation. I mean, I could say something positive about every one of these groups, but let me just focus on the group that this really should be about all the time, which is the student. The fact that I see so many students here, an roughly equal percentage of students and parents, is really encouraging because students, the more agency and responsibility you accept for your college planning, the more successful you're going to be. It doesn't mean you have to do it alone. In fact, you shouldn't do it alone. And parents should absolutely be involved with supporting their students. And there are other professionals that can help you. We'll be talking about that. But it's ultimately the student that's going to be attending college. You students are the ones who will be there for 4 years, learning and growing and planning for your future. And it means it's really important for you to be part of this. For a lot of students, college planning is really the first series of big decisions that they make for themselves in their own lives. And it's really encouraging to see so many of you here. So thank you to all of the groups for showing up, but in particular, students, I'm really impressed to see so many of you here, and let's make it worth your while. So we're going to keep our introductions mercifully brief so we can get to the good information. So Candace mentioned I'm from Collegewise. So Collegewise is a college admissions counseling and tutoring company I founded 25 years ago. I worked with 9 students the first fall that I started the company, and I drove to their houses and we sat at their kitchen tables and completed college applications. And so here we are 25 years later. We celebrated our 25th birthday last August. And our goal is to be the most trusted source of expert advice for students to access the transformative power of higher education. We feel like there is so much confusion, there's so much anxiety, there's so much conflicting information about getting into college and accessing this power of higher education. So we've really made it our mission to try to improve that and make it better and help students and parents and educators who want to come and hear what we have to say to give them the best, most accurate, up-to-date, helpful information. And I'm really glad that you're here today so we can hopefully do that for you. We really have 3 jobs at Collegewise. The first is what we're doing today. We love sharing helpful information and advice with families and with educators. We do this in webinars like this one. We do it with webinars that we host on our own platform at Collegewise. We write blogs. We create free resources. We go and do workshops at high schools. Any place where someone asks, can you come help us understand more about college admissions? We want to be there. To that end, our second job is we formally partner with schools and organizations to help deliver this kind of information. So a school can bring us in during the summer to do application workshops for their seniors. Companies can bring us in as an HR benefit for their employees who can attend webinars and learn more about the college admissions process. And it gives us those formal partnerships, give us more vehicles to share this information. But really the way that we make our living every day is by working with individual students. So families can hire us to be like their personal coaches with their student to help plan for college. Some people come to us for just a few hours to get a few questions answered, and some people come to us to help them through the entire process, and we have all sorts of programs in between. We'll be giving everyone an option at the end of the seminar to learn more about Collegewise, and even to set up a free introductory consultation where you can learn more about what it is that we do. But before we give you that opportunity, we have to deliver what we promised to deliver today. So my name is Kevin McMullin, and as Candace mentioned, I'm the founder and the Chief Education Officer at Collegewise. And as I told you, I founded the company. So you've learned about me. I want to give you a chance to meet my colleague, Julie, who I'll be presenting with today, who will do a much better job of introducing herself than I would for her. So Julie, it's all yours to introduce yourself and get us started.
Sure. Yeah. Thanks so much. Hi, everyone. My name is Julie Brasseaux. So I'm also part of Collegewise. I am a college counselor here. I am based in Houston, Texas. We have counselors in tons of different states all over. We work with students from all over. I actually came to the Collegewise side after 7 years of being on the admission side. So I formerly worked as an assistant director of admission at Tulane University in New Orleans. If you can see, I have all these banners, and that one right there in the middle is Tulane. And I also went to Tulane for undergrad, and then UT Austin for my counselor education master's before working in admissions and then coming back to this side. So when I was on the other side, I worked reading about 10,000 admission applications. I was seeing everything in that regard, kind of what the university is looking for on their point of view. And I also helped review full tuition scholarships and scholarship community service applications. So tons of different avenues there. And yeah, now I work one-on-one with students on the Collegewise side. So as Kevin said, we're here. We have tons of slides to get through. So I'm going to get to the next one so you can kind of see everything that we've prepared for you. So in general, as a junior, this is kind of the main time that you're really starting to think about the college admission process. It's looming, kind of beginning to start over the summer. A lot of what you hear is sometimes bad news is kind of what drives the news cycle. So a lot of it is fear-driven narratives. You can read a lot of these. So it says elite college admissions tougher than ever. These are the ones that have decreased the most since 2001. All of that. Those are the headlines that will attract the most readers, which is unfortunate because the truth is that it is not overly difficult to be admitted to a university if you're looking widespread. So how hard it is to get in, there's really only about 50 universities that are those really tip-top elite 3% to 10% acceptance rate. I have a couple more slides that'll show the percentage breakdown. And because of all of this kind of bad news you're hearing, it becomes really a stressful, for students, it feels like a stressful rite of passage that you're hoping to get out of unscathed or just badly cut, which is not what we want you to feel like on the Collegewise side. So that's why we work with students to kind of show the different options available rather than just the immediate first schools that might come to mind. And a couple of things that I looked up actually earlier this week, Harvard joined other schools like Stanford and Princeton and Penn in not releasing the data immediately when they admit students on their acceptance rate. So they're no longer proudly saying, oh, we have a 5% acceptance rate and kind of feeding into that narrative. They do legally need to report it later in the fall, but it's not something that they're kind of boasting about. They really want to focus on the students that are applying and not perpetuating that cycle. There's also news stories that you might be hearing of students who are earning $1 million in scholarships by collecting a bunch of acceptances. So I never really appreciate those news articles either, because those students are usually getting 60, 70 admission offers where you can only go to one university. So at Collegewise, we're also trying to help students find the best fit, make sure they're not overexerting themselves by applying to literally 70 schools like some of those students, but really kind of a nice number of maybe 8 to 12 or whatever would be right for the student, but something that's much more manageable. And that kind of collecting acceptances and shotgunning is sometimes what students will call it, feeds into these narratives. And that's why it becomes harder and harder to be admitted because the schools are getting so many more applications for the same number of spots. So when you think about it, those are kind of all of the factors that are going into those news stories. And the reality, so as I was just mentioning, let's go to this next slide, is that there are actually 2,500 universities or so in the country, four-year colleges, and on average colleges accept 2/3 of their applicants. So the ones that we are hearing about all the time are the ones that are not included in that narrative. So for example, there's actually a link that I use all the time with my Texas students that says, here are the auto admission acceptances in Texas. And it'll say, if you have this, for example, ACT score, and you're in the top 15% of your class, you will be guaranteed admission to these schools. And then vice versa. If you have this score and you're in the top 50%, you're guaranteed admission to these schools in the state. So I don't know if every single state has that link, but there are universities where you will know that you are auto admitted based on your stats. The ones that you're kind of thinking of are, I think I have a slide later, so I don't want to spoil too much, something called holistic review. So I will delve into that in a bit, but just know that there are some in every state where you will be able to kind of have those auto admit acceptances and really feel confident in your selection process if you add those to your list. And just knowing that something that we hear about a lot, especially with families coming into Collegewise, is that kind of society has produced this thought that going to a more prestigious school or one that has a lower acceptance rate will set you up better for your job and advantageous success afterwards. And with working over 30,000 plus students with Collegewise, we have not had a direct correlation of this school and then this student is now doing so much better than this other student who went to a higher acceptance rate school. It really isn't like that. What's more important is what the student is doing in college rather than where they're going to do it. So that's something that we definitely encourage our students to kind of look into as they build their college list. And this is kind of the pie chart that I was referring to a couple slides ago. So there are about 80% of the universities in the country have more than 50% of students are admitted. So we are really able to find a lot of different opportunities for every kind of student. Kevin didn't mention, but we work with students ranging, from A to C and everywhere in between. There's not just, we only accept, students who are tip top. We really want to work with everyone and help them find their best fit. And it's only those 5% of schools that have a less than 20% acceptance rate. So it really is up to the student on kind of building their list to make sure that they're really opening themselves up, not just to the ones that you're hearing about all the time, but doing some deep research on what would be a great option for them. And Another thing I wanted to mention was we are also usually building, I've kind of alluded to this phrase, but reach, target, and likely schools on a list for students, and which is what we recommend, even if you don't work with us, making that for yourself or working with your high school counselor. So reaches would be, sometimes there are schools that are reaches for everybody. Those ones that are 20% or less, that's going to be a reach, whether you're valedictorian or in the middle of the class. And then target would be one where you're not likely to be, but you have a great chance to be admitted based on the stats. So if your ACT is in the range of their typical admitted students, and then your GPA as well, and then the acceptance rate is usually between 30 to 70%. Those are kind of how we delegate a target. And then a likely school, typically above 70% acceptance rate, something where you are likely to be admitted based on your stats comparable to who they typically admit. And another factor to think about in that is that if you are applying to likely schools, one, obviously increases your chances of admission, but it also increases your chances of merit scholarships if that is something that they have available at that university, because that scholarship would be something that they would want to entice students to attend to their school. So not every school has merit scholarships, but a lot of the ones that are likely schools will be pretty generous to students who are applying that are above their typical average. So that was just a brief kind of overview of that information. And then I know, Kevin, you're going to get us started on kind of some 5 tips for specific college planning for juniors.
I am, and I'm sure I'm going to jinx myself, but I have already remembered to unmute myself twice before I started speaking. So I feel like this webinar is off to a great start for us. So, if you're a junior, you're in 11th grade, and you really want to actively plan for college and make sure you're doing the right things, we want to give you what we think are the most important things that you could do. And we're going really in order of importance here. If you haven't done this already, you really should schedule a meeting with your school counselor. Now, some of you might be thinking, I don't even know what a school counselor is. Do we have those here? You almost certainly do have them. And I want to say a couple things about school counselors. I've been doing this 25 years. I've had the privilege of working with and partnering with school counselors. I've gotten to know a lot of them over the years. We have hired a lot of school counselors to come and work for us. And at Collegewise, we really believe the school counselors are the unsung superheroes of the high school experience. The list of responsibilities that most school counselors have to take on at their school is really impressive, how they show up to support their students. So if somebody needs to change their course schedule, they go and meet with their school counselor. If a student is wrestling with anxiety or depression and needs to speak with someone, they go talk to their school counselor. If a student is having a problem at home that's disrupting their academic experience, they go talk to their school counselor. And if you have questions about how to plan for college, you go and talk with your school counselor. I'm saying this because I want to do a preemptive takedown of an objection that I frequently hear from teenagers. In the 25 years I've been doing this, I have heard a lot of teenagers say, when I give them this advice, go schedule a meeting with your school counselor, they say, oh, well, the counselors at our school don't really do anything. And every time I have heard a student say that, I reply with a question, well, have you ever taken the initiative to go and see them or to ask to schedule a meeting and talk about this? And not once have I ever heard a student reply, yes, I have done that, and they still weren't helpful. So this goes back to the theme I said at the beginning. Students need to take responsibility for their own college planning. It does not mean that you need to do it alone, but it is not your school counselor's job to get a lasso out and go find you on campus and bring you into their office to talk about college. So a really healthy and mature step for a student to take is to go find your school counselor, ask how you go about having a meeting with them. What's the, how do they want you to do that? Do you schedule it? Do you just show up to their office? But they're wonderful, generous people that are there to help students. So take the initiative so they can help you. And when you go to see your school counselor, a couple questions you can ask. And I think I would start here. First, what are some appropriate colleges for me to consider? Your school counselor has knowledge that really very few other people have. First, they know about college admissions. They know the college outcomes of the members of your school who have previously applied to colleges. So they've seen a lot of results for what kinds of students, A students, C students, everyone in between. Where did they apply? Where did they get in? They know all the various aspects and wrinkles of your high school, like what classes are offered, are there honors classes, what are weighted grades, what are not weighted grades, all of these things they have knowledge about. So when you sit with them and they look at your transcript and you tell them a little bit about what you might be looking for in a college, if you've even gotten that far, they will be able to recommend some appropriate colleges for you to consider as a starting point, because you're doing this in the spring of your junior year. You don't have to decide tomorrow where you're going to be applying to college, but you want to start that process. It's a really healthy question to ask. Number two, are there any steps I could take to improve my chances of admission? So your school counselor might say, you could maybe take a slightly more challenging curriculum in the fall of your senior year. I'll be talking about that. Or they might say, if you even just raised your grade point average by, just from like a 3.1 to a 3.3, and you've still got at least one, maybe two more semesters to do that, and I'll talk about why that might be the case, that might really make a difference for you at some of these schools. Or you could retake this standardized test, or you could maybe try to make an even bigger impact at this activity that you're already participating in, or you could really make an effort to shine in this particular class where you're already doing well, because you are already considering some colleges that will ask for teacher letters of recommendation as part of the application. So if you wait until the fall of your senior year when you're applying to college to see your school counselor and ask questions like these, you've run out of a lot of that runway where you can make these decisions. But if you go see them now, they can recommend appropriate steps that can really make a difference in terms of which colleges are most likely to admit you. And finally, I think, and you can ask them anything that you want to know about college, but we're trying to give you sort of the foundational questions you can start with. You can also ask them, are representatives from any colleges visiting our campus this spring? Julie did this when she worked in admissions. When admissions officers aren't reading applications all the time, they're doing that in the fall and maybe like a little bit into January. But for the rest of the year, what they're doing is recruiting. And recruiting for admissions officers means they are each assigned to different geographical locations, and they go out and hit the road. And one of the things they do is go and visit high schools. And so your school might have announcements where they say, here are the colleges that are going to be visiting us this month, and they're going to be here at lunch, or they're going to be here after school. And this is free information that you can come and hear from these representatives who have come to your high school campus. So it's really good to find out ahead of time which ones are going to be coming. Are these any schools that might be appropriate for me? Because I would love to go and learn more about them by someone who works at that school. So instead of having to just read about it on a website, which is still valuable, you can have a real, live, knowledgeable human being there at your campus who works on that college campus, and who can tell you about life there and their admissions policies, and really like maybe even create somewhat of a personal connection with that person. So I encourage you to start by meeting with your school counselor. It will sort of formally plant the stake in the ground in their head that this is a student who is taking some agency and some responsibility for their college planning, and they've taken their first step of coming to meet with me. And then your counselor might also say, well, why don't you come back and see me in a couple months or at this particular time so that we can carry on this conversation. But in the interim, here are some things that you could be doing. So let's start there. And for the next step, after you've met with your school counselor, Julie's going to take you through that. Take it away, Julie. Sorry,
Sure.
That's still my slide.
It is still you, but I can talk about it.
You're the next one. I wanted to mention that the school counselor, your school, and usually led by your school counselors, many of them will also do college-related events on campus, often in the evening. So your school might say, we're going to have an event for all the 11th graders and their parents where you can come here in the evening. We're going to give you some information about planning for college, about applying for financial aid. Sometimes they'll bring in outside guest speakers. College-wise, we are frequently guest speakers at those particular events. And so if you are meeting with your school counselor, they have the opportunity to tell you about those things, to remind you of them, and to tell you which events they're planning that might be most appropriate for you. So take advantage of all of the information and guidance that you have right there on your high school campus in the form of these events and your school counselor. I find that with many students, if not a majority of the students, those resources are really sadly underutilized. And the students who utilize that help and who go and see their school counselor, they're always more successful and they're less stressed about the process because they feel more informed and more in control. Now, Julie, it is your turn. Sorry about that.
Sure. So yes, the next list or the next number on the list, which I kind of briefly mentioned earlier, is creating a working list that would be a good fit for you. So 6 to 8 is a great option. Sometimes we will work with students usually up to 12. But if you are filling up your Common App with more than 20 schools, because that's the limit, and trying to figure out a way to do more, then maybe you need to take another look at your list to determine, if you're really looking into fit, or as I was mentioning earlier, kind of collecting those acceptances. You can only go to one university. So really taking that stress off of you to not have to be writing essays till the very last minute is a great goal to have. So the working list on, let's say you're working on 8, 2 colleges where you will be admitted. So those might be those guaranteed admissions I was mentioning about, which pretty much every state will have at least one school where you can find that. So that will show, those are the ones that are not holistic review, which I'll get into later, but the ones that say if you have this GPA and this score, etc., you'll be admitted. 2 colleges in your home state. So those are typically more affordable. I have some slides a little bit about kind of out of state as well, but usually in-state schools will give preference not only for admission, but also for scholarships for students that are from that area. So that would be something to have a great kind of backup, or not backup, but good option to have. 2 colleges where you will not need significant financial aid. Some of these may overlap, but this is just something to make sure that you have on your list. And then 2 dream colleges. So we're never trying to be discouraging and say, hey, there's such a small chance you won't get in. We never would say that to a student. But making sure that your entire list is not dream colleges, that would be, a huge reach for anybody. But at least 2 would be a great thing to have so that, you can say you shot your shot and that you tried your best to get into those. So that's a good number to start with.
Julie, would you mind if I layered something in on that particular slide? Is that okay if I interject here? One of the important things to remember if you're an 11th grader starting your planning now is that while you are going to apply to college this fall, which means you'll need to have decided where you're going to apply, you won't decide where you're actually going to college until the end of your senior year. It's usually May 1st when you make that decision. And there are some differences if you apply at a particular college's early decision program where they want you to apply early in your senior year and they'll tell you yes or no before Christmas. But if they tell you yes, then you're bound to go there. These are special admissions programs, and they're an option for some students applying to those colleges. They are not the norm in college admissions. And I mention that because sometimes students can get, understandably, they get very tense about putting colleges on the list. They say things like, well, I don't know if I want to go that far away from home, so I don't know if I want to apply to that particular school. And it takes some of that pressure off if you remember, I'm not actually deciding where I go until the end of my senior year. I'm going to be almost certainly 18 by that point in time. And so you might be a very different person, in May of your senior year than you are today. So allow yourself some of that flexibility. And a couple other things just to note here, the dream colleges, and this is true for a lot of the students we work with, but it doesn't have to be this way. For a lot of students, their dream colleges are colleges that are not likely to accept them. And for many people, when something is hard to get, it makes it more appealing for us. So a lot of students will say, well, I have a dream of attending this school or that school, and my chances of admission aren't good, but I just want to take my chance. We think that's really healthy. What we don't think is healthy is when a student says, I'm going to play the lottery and apply to 20 of those dream colleges and hope that one of them takes me. So we've named 2 dream colleges here to sort of limit that list for people. Now, if you are one of those students who does your college research and talks with your school counselor and comes to the conclusion, yeah, I have 1 or 2 dream colleges, and they are also colleges where I will be admitted. And there are also colleges where I will not need much or any financial aid. Throw your hands up in the air and do a happy dance. You are living the college planning dream if that happens. So there's no law saying you have to pick some dream colleges that are officially out of your reach. We're just telling you that if you do have a few of those, try not to pick too many of them. You want your list to be balanced, as Julie said, and you want to make sure that, that within that balanced list, that you genuinely would be happy going to any one of those schools. You might like some more than others, but you really start to feel that sense of agency and control and positivity when you say, I've got a list of 6 or 8 colleges, and I've been thoughtful about them. My school counselor has endorsed this list. There might be 1 or 2 that I'd like to go to more than others, but ultimately I'd be happy going to any one of these. That is a very smart college list, and it will leave you in a really good position when you apply in the fall. Thank you, Julie, for giving me that window here.
Sure. That actually reminded me, before I continue about the next thing, a lot of our students, the majority of students in general, will get denied from somewhere. And that's not something to be overly upset or dismayed about. It really is something that, as I think Kevin used the word healthy, that you tried a healthy stretch, and that you really tried to do something that was out of your comfort zone, or that you were trying to reach a bit. So there's nothing wrong with getting denied at all. And you should work to be able to accept that as a high school senior, which will be hard in the first time, but is very normal. It also reminded me that there is I think the pronunciation is strange, but it's called WUE, W-U-E, Western Undergraduate Exchange. And this is just one example. I'm sure there are others in other regions, but WUE, again, Western Undergraduate Exchange, you can look that up, is something that actually gives students in certain states in the West ability to apply for in-state or near in-state tuition at a lot of universities that are not in their state. So maybe if you're in California, Oregon, Washington, those states over on the West are all kind of working together to make it so that students can still leave their state at an affordable price. So that's also something to consider when you're building that list, is those opportunities. And again, in Texas, I know Arkansas, Oklahoma, those are some states that usually give Texas students near in-state tuition. Not every university in those states, but a lot of them do. So things to look into as you build your list. And then just a little bit about college fairs. So I know Kevin was talking about these college nights with kind of parent or information nights, but then there are also college fairs. So this one particularly looks like it might be hosted at a high school. And again, I think some of you in the chat were saying maybe visitors don't typically come to your high school. So usually it's not every school that will get visitors, but definitely there is also, I just want to show the next slide, something called NACAC college fairs. So NACAC is basically the college admission counseling big body that will host a number of different fairs in, I want to say 50 or so cities pretty much every year. So major cities, tons of different states. And that is something that you can look into right now or after this. Oh, I think I froze. Am I back?
No, you're back. I was going to say they also offer virtual college fairs. So if you don't see one that's going to be offered, nearby, and they do this a couple times a year. They have ones that you can attend virtually and learn more about colleges, because they will actually have the representatives there to talk about it.
And I attended these when I was on the other side as a Tulane representative. And it's usually 3 or 4 hours, where sometimes it's during the school day and schools will bring you to the college fair. And oftentimes it also includes a night portion, maybe 6 to 8 p.m., where families can come together after work or after school. And you can talk to thousands. Hopefully you don't talk to thousands, because that would be way too many to talk to. But there are options to talk to thousands of representatives. And you can go and collect pamphlets or ask a specific question, or just in general kind of start to get the names of college options in your head. And usually, or always, these are free. And usually they'll host them around the same time every year. So if you see one coming up and you can't make it, usually they'll host one again. But just knowing that these fairs, the representatives are going to meet you and to answer those questions. It's not a bother at all to go with, some prescribed questions or to come up with them as you go. And great. Oh, also, this is something that I'm going to mention on a future slide, but something called demonstrated interest that some universities will look into, which means, have you expressed, it sounds silly because if you're applying, it sounds like, yes, you've expressed your interest, but some schools will say, hey, have they engaged with us in any other capacity? And if you go and scan your name card or whatever, the barcode that they give you at these fairs, or if you write your name down when you come and tour or when you meet somebody at your school, those are all different ways to kind of show, hey, I've expressed my interest in your school. And sometimes that can help you too. So definitely, if you go to one of these fairs, get the barcode or fill out the name card. It can help you more than you think, just taking that little bit of time. And great. So one more before I show you a little bit about kind of what you can see on a college website. So this is number 3, which is researching admission requirements. And essentially, every university spends a very long amount of time updating their website, their admission requirement page, everything to try to make it as clear as possible so that students don't feel the need to have to reach out for questions. They want to make sure that everything's clear from the beginning of the process. So we have an example here. You can see our example is going to be University of Washington, or UW. So the next few slides are all going to be screenshots of the UW admissions website. And what you can see here, you just go to their, and forget, you can do this for any school. So again, if you're not interested in UW, type this up for your future school of interest, but you can go to their website. You can see the apply button is usually where it will have the most updated information. And let's see. So after you click that, it will show you. So here's the freshman application page on their website. And they actually, it looks like they apply in quarters. So other schools, it'll typically say semester. So you'd be applying usually for the fall semester if you're trying to start at the beginning of the typical school year cycle. There are also some schools that allow you to apply for kind of a January or winter start. So if it's quarterly, you'll see these different names here. And you'll see that it says when the quarter begins or when the semester begins, and then when the application opens and when it is due, as well as notification period. So that's when you would hear back about your decision. So all of that information is right there on the website. You don't have to wonder or think about when that deadline might be. Usually these deadlines are the same year over year. So it would be very unlikely that they would change their application date or anything in the meantime. And something to consider, I actually saw, I think it was a question in the Q&A, was about, will applying early help you? And I don't want to spend too much time delving into that since we do still have a lot left. But in general, so I know Kevin was talking about this kind of binding application. So yes, there are different rounds of admission that will also be listed on the website. I don't think we have the screenshot of this one particularly, but some schools will have something called early decision, which is the one Kevin was talking about, where it is binding, and you can only do that with one school. You don't have to do it with any school, but if that school is your top choice and they offer that option, it might give you a boost of admission chances because you're saying, hey, if I'm admitted, I will definitely attend. Some students are not ready to make that decision. So there's also a round called early action that will probably be the most popular round that the majority of you students will apply in because it is early, but it gets it off your plate, but you're not being bound by any admission. Usually you're able to take all your acceptances and wait until May 1st to make your final decision if you need that long. And then the last round is called regular decision, which is due in January. And that one is a little bit later. You don't find out until about April 1st. So usually, at least at Collegewise, we recommend as many students applying early action as possible to get those decisions sooner and kind of alleviate that stress. And okay, so a little bit about freshmen by the numbers here. So you can see, look, it's nice that they shared the acceptance rate for the residents of that state, but then also it says non-residents and then internationals. Non-residents would mean that you live in a state that's not Washington. So that's also something to consider, that sometimes when you just Google like University of Washington acceptance rate, it might say, something higher than the 51%, which is what, let's say if you're from Texas, that would be your kind of chance of admission. It might say 60%, or it might say 55, kind of averaging the two, but something to really delve into if you want to get a little bit deeper, especially for these state schools that will divide based on your residency. This might be getting a little too deep, but there is something called the Common Data Set, or CDS, for every university. That is also where they post their, as I was mentioning, Harvard kind of holding back their acceptance rates. That is where you need to post, the universities will post that information. So they will show, this is how many residents applied, this is how many we admitted, this is how many enrolled. Same thing, that bottom purple sentence where it says middle 50%, that common data set will also say our middle 50% this year was this GPA or this test score. So that way it gives you an idea of where you fall in the students who were admitted in the last year. And it is, I will admit, the common data set is very long. It's multiple pages. So you really have to kind of dive into that data to see it. But just know that it is available. But also on this website, you can see kind of some of those quick facts pulled out if you don't want to dive into the common data set. But just knowing in general that applying to a state school that's not in your state, the acceptance rate might be different than what's listed. Okay, finally, holistic review. I've mentioned it twice now, so here we are. So holistic review essentially means that there are many factors that are being considered in the admission process and not just a test score or GPA. So almost it's certainly the majority of those kind of 5% of the very selective universities are all doing holistic review, which means even if you're valedictorian, even if you have a 36 ACT, there is no guarantee for anybody that they will be admitted. They all have to be reviewed entirely in their application. So obviously, as you can see here where it says preparation and performance, those are all things that you can do to kind of strengthen your academic piece of your application. And the academic piece is pretty much you're opening the door to get into the room to be considered. So if you don't have the academics, it doesn't matter how great your essay is. You really need to kind of show that you will be successful at that university first. So it mentions here a strong level of academic achievement with grades and rigor, taking advantage of kind of those rigorous courses, maybe like AP or IB, and demonstrating a positive grade trend, not a downward trend. So a little bit kind of on that note, the next few things after academics. So the first thing you obviously think of is, okay, my academics need to be on point. The pieces after that are personal achievements and characteristics. So it is definitely going beyond the grades and test scores, where the admission counselors will be looking at your essays and recommendations. That's where those kind of personal qualities where you can say, hey, I'm an interesting person. I would be a great roommate. I would be an alum who would be, a great person to have around. That's kind of some of the stuff that might be showing up on essays, recommendations as well. We want to know how you represent yourself to the adults in the room, not just your scores. So those will all be qualities that are considered. Some of these other factors that are considered are community service, leadership. If you have a significant responsibility, maybe you're the oldest sibling and you need to babysit your siblings and you can't do as many activities, or maybe you have a part-time job. The number of activities and kind of your involvement will definitely be considered as well. And some of these other factors, I guess this is mentioned specifically on the UW website where it says attaining a college prep education despite socioeconomic disadvantages. And then also just in general, demonstrating cultural awareness and that you're open to being in a diverse community and being a great member of that community too. So my last slide before I'll pass to Kevin. So I know I just showed a lot of different kind of pieces of what you can find on just one website, but they will also try to make it as streamlined as possible when it comes to what you actually need to do to apply. So here on this example, it's showing to complete the application, submit the essay responses, obviously the fee, test scores. It looks like there's a question mark. So UW must be test optional, which means that if you like your test score and you want to send it in, you're able to send that. Some schools will be test required. Some will be test free, like the UCs. So you'll need to look into that on your different list of schools. Transcripts will be coming from your counselor as well as your rec letters. And one thing to note is that all of your pieces of your application should be there by the deadline, not just your piece. So you don't want to be submitting on November 14th at 11:59 p.m., waiting till the last second, because everything should be there. And we don't want you to miss any piece of, important information because you were not applied on time. So definitely be talking to your teachers later in the spring about rec letters and getting all of that information sent well in advance so that you're not caught in that situation. And let's see, the last thing I was going to say was also check your email. So if you don't have a college email or an email that you can reliably go to kind of check that information, it can also be helpful to create a college email so that all of your application information goes in one place instead of getting it tied up with your school information too. So Kevin, if you could continue on us through the end.
Yeah, thanks, Julie. And, I love that Julie spent that time on that particular information, because I feel like when it comes to thinking about getting into college and what you need to do and what the admissions offices are looking for, I feel that information is often perceived unnecessarily so to be overly mysterious and secretive. And what you can take from this is that colleges are very open about what they want, what's required, how they evaluate students. And so it's such helpful information that you can find on the college's website. And we saw a lot of questions coming through that were smart questions about, very particular about UW's requirements. And as Julie said, you'll find similar web pages on every college's website. But those specific questions can then be directed to that individual school. It's also really good for students to do that themselves, again, taking that agency for their college planning. But when you call a college or you email a college and say, I've been reviewing your website, I saw this information, and I'd really like to understand, is the GPA range that you're listing, is that a weighted GPA or an unweighted GPA? And they will answer that question, but it also demonstrates to that student has been doing their homework and is reviewing the website. And so when in doubt, if you're confused or you have questions about what a particular college is looking for, go to those websites, those pages like Julie just showed you. So now I want to talk about really, and we're looking at sort of things that juniors can do with the remaining time that you have left before you apply to college that can really make a big difference. And plan your senior year courses is a big one. Now, why is that? Well, some seniors, or some juniors, when they're planning their senior year, they feel like senior year is when the vacation can start, right? I've worked so hard freshman, sophomore, and junior year. Now I can back off a little bit and not take classes that are quite so rigorous. But the colleges, every college in the country, will look at what classes you decide to take for your senior year in the first semester and the second semester. So they're going to want to see, are you continuing or even increasing the rigor that you had in place before this? Now, depending on where you go to school and depending on your level of achievement leading up to that time, that might mean that you continue to take honors classes or you continue to take AP classes, or it might mean that you take a fourth year of language, even though you've already satisfied the requirements for graduation. Or maybe you take a fourth year of math, even though you've already satisfied that. Or you've taken biology and chemistry, but now you're going to take physics as a senior. Now, how rigorous does it need to be? That totally depends on the college. If you want to apply to one of those schools where that Julie mentioned, all that bad news is true, and they're taking 20 or 10 or 5 out of every 100 applicants, they're going to expect that you're taking the most rigorous curriculum possible at your high school. And then the catch-22 is you could do that, and the chances of admission are so slim, it doesn't necessarily mean you'll get in. But we're not suggesting that you need to overburden yourself with academic, with an overload of academic classes in your senior year. Maybe a good place to start would be, again, have the conversation with your school counselor. Great piece to weave in when you're meeting with them to find out what classes are offered senior year, get their advice about what might be appropriate for you. And one good place to start is if you have a favorite subject or a best subject, oftentimes those overlap. That's a great place to challenge yourself. So if you say, I'm not great at every subject, most students aren't, by the way, but I love math. Well, then take the fourth year of math. Or if you say, I love my English classes, I really love reading books and I love writing, and we have an AP English class that's offered in my senior year and I'm eligible for it, that's a great class to go challenge yourself. It gives you a chance to show your academic best self in a challenging subject. And it makes sense why colleges care about this, because there's lots that you can do on a college campus. You're living in a dorm, you can get into clubs, you can go to football games depending on where you go to school. But college is school first and foremost, right? You're going to be attending classes and getting grades, and they want to see that you're preparing appropriately for that. And so taking an appropriately rigorous course schedule in the fall of your senior year is a really great way to demonstrate to colleges that you're serious about this planning. Now, every college in the country will look at the courses that you pick for your first semester of your senior year. Not necessarily every college will look at the grades that you get in those courses before they make an admissions decision. That's generally something that most private schools do, rather as opposed to the public universities. So many private colleges will ask you as part of the application process before they make a decision, they will ask you to have your school send a 7th semester transcript to them. That is, what are the grades that you got in the first semester of your senior year? And once they see those, they'll make a decision. But every college in the country, once they admit you, will say, send us your grades that you got from the first semester. And usually they'll also want to see them from the second semester because they want to make sure that you don't go off an academic cliff after you get your admission. But for any place that you might be applying, planning a strong senior year course schedule will help you, as will finishing your junior year strong. And that's why this is our final tip. For colleges, your junior year is the last full year of academic preparation that they are able to evaluate before making a decision about you. And so if you are ever going to put in the extra time and energy and effort to get the best grades you think you're capable of doing, the second semester of your junior year is a great time to do it. Julie can share more about this information. We've learned this from all the former admissions officers that work with us at Collegewise, but admissions officers pay attention to grade trends. Meaning maybe you didn't, some students, maybe you didn't do as well freshman or sophomore year, but you really improved your junior year, and then you continued challenging yourself and did so in the senior year. And so as opposed to just looking at your overall GPA and saying, well, that's the student that you are, every college is going to dig in under the hood and try to get a sense of, well, what led to that GPA? Not just what classes did you take, but also have there been any trends that we should notice? And it's always great to be getting better with age as you get closer to applying and eventually attending college. So we really encourage all of our students to lean into this. And I should say out loud, a lot of the juniors that we work with are pretty tired. Junior year is often like a pretty academically heavy year from them. Many times you're involved in a lot of extracurricular activities. And we've had a lot of juniors who've gone on to college and come back and told us, like, I never worked harder than I did in my junior year. So I want to recognize and acknowledge that for a lot of you, you might be thinking, I've really got my foot on the academic gas pedal already. There's nothing left more for me to do. And if that's the case, great. You are already putting in that effort. But for those of you who feel like, I might be able to do a little more and a little better than I am right now, doing that at the second semester of your junior year can make a big difference about where you do and do not get into college. So this isn't everything that you need to do for college planning, but as a junior in February, doing these 5 things will put you in a very good position from a college perspective. You'll have a school counselor who knows that you are actively engaging in your college search. You'll have in your college planning. You'll have a working list of 6 or 8 colleges where you can learn more about admissions requirements and make adjustments, take particular standardized tests if you need to, do anything else that you need to do to satisfy those particular schools. And even if that college list changes a little bit, almost certainly that planning that you've done will satisfy many, if not all, of the other colleges that you might look at. As you're looking at the research, you're researching the admissions requirements, you'll have a good sense of your admissibility to these colleges. You'll be able to make adjustments. You'll be wiser about what colleges are looking for. And planning your senior year courses and finishing your junior year strong allow you to zero in on the piece of the puzzle that colleges care most about, which is what classes are you taking and what grades have you gotten in those courses? When you do those things, you set yourself up for a lot of success. And so before we close this, I want to see, we have a colleague lurking in the background here. Belinda, have you seen any questions come across that might be appropriate for us to pose and answer to the crowd?
I think she moved them into this little folder that we can see, Kevin, that says questions. If you go in the inbox.
Okay.
There's just a few.
You scroll and pick one, and I'll pick one, and then we'll move on to close and let people get on with their evening.
Yes. So one of them was, what would be the next step if my student is not accepted into any college? What is the recommendation? So let's say you are the parent of a senior, aka somebody who's already applied to all of the schools. Even at this point in February, yes, the majority of schools are already past their deadline, but there is actually a huge list that NACAC, that group that we were talking about earlier, will create in the spring that says, here are schools that are still accepting applications. Here are schools that are still open. And those will run usually up until August. So up until right when you need to get started on your fall semester. So even if it's not the first school that you might have thought of, there are some really great universities on there. It would be, at least, again, I don't know your student, but it would be pretty difficult to be admitted to no colleges if you are looking into those options.
No, that's great. Thank you for tackling that one. I want to answer the one someone asked about scholarships and what are they and how do you apply for one? We haven't talked at all about paying for college in this particular webinar. We talk about that all the time. It's a big topic. But I think what I want to leave people with here today, and I should start by saying that as the cost of college has increased, more and more families and their students are understandably concerned about their ability to pay for that. Now, there are really 2 different parts of the puzzle of getting help to pay for college. One is financial aid. Financial aid is offered by the states, the federal government, and the colleges themselves. That is where most of the financial assistance to pay for college is available. There are billions of dollars available in these financial aid pools. And the way that you access that financial aid, there are really just two forms that you fill out. And for many colleges, it's only one. There's a form called the FAFSA, which is the free application for federal student aid. And for many private colleges, they will also ask you to fill out a form called the profile. But when you are on those individual colleges' websites and you're in the apply section and getting that information about admission, they are also just as open about what you need to do to apply for that financial aid. And those forms, once you fill them out, you can send them to any college that you are applying to. And so that is the starting point for getting the financial assistance that you need to apply for college. Unfortunately, for most students, you don't find out your financial aid award until you actually are admitted to the college. So you're flying a little bit blind while you're applying, and that's why we recommended that you apply to some schools where you won't need as much financial assistance. But there's a lot more money available than a lot of people recognize, and to avail yourself of it, you want to follow those two particular forms. Now, scholarships, some schools do give their own scholarships, but usually when people talk about scholarships, those are what we call outside scholarships. Those are things that are offered by companies or community-based organizations or other institutions that want to reward particular students, maybe that have shown an interest in what they do. And I don't want to dismiss these, but I do want to say that those outside scholarships only account for 5% of the available financial aid to attend college. The rest you get by filling out those financial aid forms. So if financial, and the ability to pay for college is a big concern for you, I think it's smart to do both of those things, but I would not plan on the outside scholarships covering all the cost and the assistance that you need. Go first with the federal and state and college aid that's available by filing that FAFSA and the profile form. And that is really the starting point for all financial aid. And then the outside scholarships can sort of supplement that if you're successful when you do it. Those were great questions. I appreciate you asking them. So to close us out here, we've talked a little bit about Collegewise. You've met one of our counselors, Julie. We've talked a little bit about the kinds of advice that we share with our students. And that's exactly the kind of advice we've shared tonight. We are having these conversations with our students at Collegewise right now. We are still recommending that they speak with their school counselor because that counselor is their in-house expert there. But we feel that we can work well with school counselors when our student is availing themselves of that help. Then we can sort of supplement what they might not be getting there. And sometimes they get everything they need at that school and they don't need somebody like us. But if you would like to learn more about what we do, and you'd like to consider, might this be something that would be useful for my student? We've worked with 30,000 students to help them get into college. As Julie mentioned at the beginning, we've worked with A students, C students, and everyone in between. This is not a place at Collegewise where we only want to work with the straight A students. We work with a lot of them, and we love working with them, but we love a C student and a B student as long as they want to go to college and they want to do the work in a program like ours. Our doors are wide open. We're not for everybody, but we do have an approach that works really well for the families that feel like they fit well with us. And so to get a sense of if our program might be right for you, I'll put up another poll here that will give you a chance to get more information. And if you would like to, that choice A, complimentary meeting, it really is complimentary. There's no hidden fee we're going to charge you there. Everyone who's in our program today started with that option A, where they called us and they talked with one of our program advisors, and they said, I want to learn more about what you do. I want to tell you about my particular student, and I want to get a sense of if you might be able to help us. One of the things I really love about our program advisors at Collegewise is they are here to help people. They're not here just to push programs on people that families don't need. Not everybody needs somebody like us to get into college. In fact, the vast majority of people applying to college don't work with an independent advisor like us, but those who do and who choose an independent advisor that fits well with their needs and their budget, they tend to feel like they get a lot of good assistance and good encouragement, maybe a little cheerleading along the way. So our program advisors are happy to tell you, they get the sense that maybe you don't need our help, or maybe the kind of help you need isn't really the kind that we provide. But if you do have that introductory meeting and learn that there might be a good fit, they can introduce you to one of our counselors, might be Julie, might be another one of our counselors. But really, it is the great joy of our professional life to get to work with students closely, one-on-one, and get to know them, get to know their parents, and be part of their college planning journey. And if you think that might be helpful for you, we would love to get the chance to meet you. You can also avail yourself of those options by scanning one of these QR codes. And we put one up there particularly for educators if you would like to learn more about the kind of partnership work that we do with schools, or if you'd like to invite us to speak or to do a webinar at your particular school on a college admissions related topic. We always love to share that information because it's part of our mission. Candace, do you want to come back on and take us home before we sign off here?
Absolutely. You see me? There we go. All right. Well, thank you so much to all our presenters from Collegewise. We are so happy to have this partnership for the entire year. Just to let all of you know, our My Journey page for the first time ever has the full year lineup of all of the webinars that we are offering. And I did see some things in the chat related to being an athlete, being a fine arts student, and we are doing specialized webinars about some of those special topics in the fall. That link will be included in the email that has this recording after this. Thank you so much to both of our presenters and to everyone who attended tonight. I hope that you found this session useful, and yeah, just so much great information. And we're really excited to help you in this journey from junior year to senior year and in the college application process. Thank you and good night.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. Have a good night.